This conference will now be recorded.
Everybody here, except with the exception of Chuck Funk. Can I entertain a motion to accept the minutes of February 2nd?
I'll make that motion for you, Bill.
Thank you, sir. Is there a second? Craig, second. Coming through.
Somebody's using a vacuum cleaner.
Yeah. Any corrections or additions to the minutes? Seeing any, I'll call for a vote. All in favor of approving the minutes as submitted, signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed, abstaining? Thank you, folks. In your package, you should have got an updated copy of the, it's entitled Capital Project Draft. I've got one that was just hot off the presses 15 minutes ago, but the only change in mine from what Chris tells me, from what you're looking at, is $1,000 additional, but I believe it's in the ARPA line item. Is that correct, Chris?
No, it's a couple of revised figures in the governor's budget,
Okay,
Town Aid Road and LoSiP.
okay. So increases?
One went down a little bit and one went up.
Okay. I like the ones that go up more.
Right.
I guess the only thing we really have to address here tonight, and I'm well aware that you guys are an advisory board to my board, but just an affirmation that you're aware of what we're recommending to be included in the budget this year. The information that we've been supplying and discussing, of course, on the ARPA is outside of the budget issue, but it's something I wanted you folks to be informed about. What I've seen on the latest version that I've got in front of me, which is $1,000 more than what you see, is that what we were recommending, if in fact the appropriation, well, there's a couple of contingencies. And Craig, you can correct me on this, or anybody else that may have more information, but one of the contingencies is that the Board of Finance is tomorrow night going to be considering the request of the Board of Education through the superintendent of increasing the potential of their lapsing fund from 1% to 2% in line with the recommendation or the latest statute. If that is done, what my understanding is that Craig is going to be recommending, I assume, Craig, you'll need your board approval on that, contributing $135,000 of that to the fuel tank project. Am I stating that correctly?
Correct. Happy to do 50%.
Okay. The only glitch that I've heard in that, and let me go back, I'm getting ahead of myself. If that happens, and there's two contingencies. One, the Board of Finance approves setting the limit of that from 1% to 2%. And two, the Board of Education approves that appropriation. We will only be taking this year out of the capital non-reoccurring fund $253,326, which is the lowest appropriation that I can recall from the CNR fund in years. So that's the news I have. The other thing I was going to mention is in my informal talks with our finance director here, she indicates that if the Board of Finance approves the total tomorrow night of the 155,000, which represents the 2%, that it will leave our unassigned fund balance about $16,000 short of the 10% that we're expected to keep in there for our bonding rating. So I just say that because I think the Board of Finance, Judy, you and Paul need to know that. Now, of course, we won't know what that unassigned fund balance is until the end of this coming fiscal year, and then you'll have your normal adjustments with unexpected funds from a variety of the different departments. I am told, I inquired and had a conversation with our tax collector yesterday, Linda Gagney, and we are on the mark for our collection anticipated rate. She's at 97 and a fraction of a percent collection rate at the point, and our goal has been 98%. So from that perspective, we're on the mark. Whether we're going to go over that 98%, which historically then goes into the unassigned fund, or it's your choice, being the Board of Finance, to the CNR fund, that's yet to be determined. But that's what I heard from Cheryl today. So I'm just passing that on for everybody's information. Anybody have any questions or comments on that?
Bill, do you want me to go over a little bit about that CNR slant non-lapsing unassigned fund balance thing that the Board of Finance is going to get tomorrow?
Absolutely.
For this board, so they know it. So at the meeting tomorrow, the Board of Ed's non-lapsing as well as a move of funds to CNR is on the agenda. So Cheryl gave the Board of Finance the numbers, and I'm just going to read. I compile them so that the board's members can read them a little bit. Basically, what it comes down to is there's 4 scenarios on this sheet that they receive. In order to maintain the 10% in unassigned funds, we have what would amount to the 4 options. Option 1 is not to move any money into the Board of Ed's non-lapsing, which that's probably not going to happen. That would leave us 139,000 available to move into CNR. Option 2 is the 1%, which is currently what the policy is, and that would leave 61,000 to transfer to CNR. Option 3 is the full 2%, which is the 155,378 of the 174,879. That's the scenario that Bill mentioned, where we would actually have to take money out of CNR to maintain the 10% in unassigned funds. And option 4 is the way the policy is currently written, there's a 3% cap. So if the Board of Finance elects to keep that part of the policy, it would limit the amount that could be moved into non-lapsing to the Board of Ed to 121,000, because then they would reach the I don't have that on here. the 3%. It would be 233,067. So that would leave $17,845 left for the Board of Finance to move, if they wish to, into CNR. And that maintains that 10% unassigned fund balance, which is important for the Moody's rating, for the bonding packages. So nobody's gonna, well, I shouldn't say nobody. I don't think myself, I can speak for myself, I won't vote to move any additional funds so that we go below the 10%. We know we have a big bonding package coming up. The bottom line is, you know, for lack of a better term, the capital budget, the capital non-recurring fund is almost completely wiped out. We have, hang on, I'm gonna have to switch screens, and I apologize. Currently, The capital non-recurring fund has $295,737 budgeted to come out for fiscal year 21-22. That was approved by the townspeople at the referendum in May of last year. There's also a carry forward of 117,466, which based on the audit of June 30th would leave $341,617. So that's how much is currently in that fund, so to speak, 341,617, based on the numbers that we have that were approved to be moved or used. What that also does not include, I don't think Cheryl updated it yet, was the 70,000 if we needed to use it from the unassigned fund balance for that dump truck that the Board of Finance and the town, actually, I should say, just approved. So you take the 341 and subtract another 70,000. So I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but it's not good news. My recommendation, and I can't speak for anybody else but myself, would be to try to look at the ARPA funds and use those monies to try to get our capital projects in line. And some of these things I don't disagree with at all. They're maintenance items that should have been done, and that's part of the problem. We've had a bad habit of kicking things down the road, and then we've had a few, to say the least, of what I would call emergency requests that the board, and I didn't get elected to the board until November. I did sit as an alternate for a couple of months prior to that, but that the Board of Finance, and whether it's the Board of Selectmen or the Board of Ed, had purchased or approved. And Chuck's not here because he spoke to it at the very first meeting we had, where he was concerned about that CNR fund getting depleted, and we're knocking on that door. So if we can, like I said, if we can use those ARPA funds based on the CCM meeting that I think most everybody probably was at, it sounds like that is entirely a possibility. I didn't know if we could use it for the oil tank bill because of the reimbursement question. But if that's possible, then that helps a lot. And the onus is going to be on, I guess, the Board of Finance and the Board of Selectmen to explain to the town what's going on. There you have it. That's all I got. Sorry.
I mean, what we're hanging our hat on a lot of these things, as you know, is the revenue deficit statement that we got from the auditors, which equates to, I think, $1,030,000. And from what I've heard, including the CCM webinar that most of us were on, I think we have the flexibility to utilize those funds, which are also, of course, called ARPA funds, to help us with that. I'm not sure I have the impression that a fuel tank replacement falls within general government services, but certainly something we could look at. Craig, you have any comments on Paul's bad news? You're muted.
You're muted, sir.
You're
I
muted,
just
Paul.
received from,
Right.
sure, obviously, I'm going to recommend that the maximum be put in there. We're never again going to get ARP ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 funds. That's a once in a lifetime opportunity. We'll get our normal title grants and IDA grants, but it's doubtful this year that we'll be able to put any more in there. I agree with Paul that we should put as much as we can into the ARPA and then try to reduce the burden. There's nothing wrong with keeping the 10% in the unassigned balance. We want to keep that bond rating. We know we're going to have a big bond coming up next year for roof and windows and things like that. That's just smart. I guess I'm racking my brain here looking for a solution that helps the town and gets us an oil tank and lets us move on here with a good bond rating. So let me absorb that for a few more minutes.
Greg, I got to tell you, Craig, just for
happen to
your
know-
benefit and actually for everybody's, this is the first year that I know of that the town has been able to move or had an unassigned fund balance at the end of less than 100,000. And the Board of Ed had one higher than 100,000. So you're 100% correct. It's never going to happen again.
That's correct.
If things were different, I don't think anybody would complain about moving everything. But unfortunately, this is the cards we were dealt, so to speak. So, including you and I. So,
Craig, what do you have in your non-lapsing fund now? I'm showing, I got an accounting today of $26,037. Is that what you're showing, or?
No, I have that. I got that from Cheryl a few minutes ago. But the previous balance that we reported to the Board of Finance in November was 98,000. So I think there's something here amiss. I'm gonna have to take a close look at this.
it's because we used audited numbers, the audit from June 30th, because those were the final hard numbers that we had. So that's why there's a difference. That's why there's that difference. In order to create the spreadsheet, Cheryl used the audited number, the last audit.
You mean between the 95,000 and the 26,000 Cheryl showing?
Yeah, looking
Well,
at
I don't know where she got the 26. All I can tell you is that
the discrepancy is on line 6, the 62,000 budgeted by CIP committee. That's where the discrepancy is. That hasn't been taken out yet.
Okay. And
I'm
what would
looking
that
at
be
it right
taken out for, Craig? Do you know?
right.
I don't recall.
I don't have that one. I don't have the one you have, Craig. So I'm looking at a different version.
Yeah,
Right, you have
I
the
don't
one
have
that
one
Cheryl
either.
gave us back in November, December.
So December, I have the memo that said that the current balance was 92,912,
Yep,
but we didn't take out the you didn't take out the 17,500 out of that from February 25th. You only took out the 18,707 for the security.
correct.
So that's the last I know.
Paul, do you know what this 62,000 to capital improvement
I do not.
reduction is?
I'm trying to see if she sent that to me and I missed it.
I thought that was one of the things I was trying, if I saw you and Judy weren't on something, I tried to forward it on to you and Judy and
Yeah,
Craig.
I mean, that's really not even the issue. Part of the problem is that there's been, like I said, there's been some of those expenses approved in between that
There's
Right, capture.
they may or may not have been tracked, or they haven't been taken out yet. So the one I have doesn't show. I remember seeing it somewhere, but the spreadsheet I have doesn't show it. Oh, there it is. Yeah, okay, I found it. It's on I was looking on the wrong page. So does that, Craig, do you know, does that include both the security, and there were two projects that were approved in that time period, weren't there?
Okay,
Yeah, there was the security and there was the solar.
Okay.
That's true. There's a mistake in this report. I just got an email from Cheryl. She's having a connection problem. She says the balance is 111,620 in the current fund.
Okay.
So that latest report we got, there's an inaccuracy. It's a typo in there in the 62.
Okay. So that's the number that she had given me the other day, 111,620. I had 619, but
Cheryl,
okay.
Cheryl just
That's the
walked
number
into
that's in
my
your memo.
office. Craig.
I think
Cheryl,
she's trying to get online, Bill. I think she's going to explain if she can get online. She says she'll explain to us when she has a better connection. I just got this. She just emailed Dina here.
Okay.
Cheryl Baker,
Yes.
she's standing here in my office.
Oh, well then.
Oh, hold on. I apologize. This is an older email. I apologize.
So the memo you had December 13th had 111,619. But
Right.
that
And I
was
think
before the
the
Board of Finance
18,707.
approval. Then you had security, you had minus that, and then there was the 17.5 in February. I don't know if that was accounted for.
Well, I mean, I can kind of simplify it. In all honesty, right? We're either gonna be able to move nothing. The Board of Finance will either be able to move $0 into CNR or possibly up to about $17,000, and that's it, depending on what the board decides to do with the non-lapsing fund for the Board of Ed, unless they set it all the way to leave it at the 1%.
Yeah, I
So
think
that
that
kind of,
fund, I think that fund, even after the 3 tabs here, the venture communications, which was the cameras you approved back in November, and MHR, the solar fees, it's still 88,037.
oh,
Okay.
I don't know why I did do that. So real quick, if I plug that number in, I get that we could, the board could move 145. I might have put that number in wrong. I did 145,030, and it would still mean that we'd be $5,700 in the red on the unassigned fund balance.
I agree, Paul. For the sake of a compromise, I think we just move that last little bit that you just mentioned and just do it and make sure that we protect the unassigned fund. I'm not opposed to that.
Okay.
You never want to be under your 10%.
Which one you mean? Just so I want to make sure that I'm clear, the 121 number, to keep it at using the audited number instead of the 80, what did you say, 88? Or just balance it out to the bottom and make it a 0 move?
You lost me, Paul.
Well, if we, hang on, let me do the math out. It's just complicated with only one screen, I got to tell you. Well, I mean, in all honesty, Craig, it's up to the Board of Finance. I can't cut you a deal. I can just tell you what, they're going to get the same information I just told you. So, but to level it to basically not have any deficit below or to not go below the 10% in an unassigned fund, the board could elect to move $139,293 to the Board of Ed's non-lapsing fund. But that means there is exactly $0 to move into CNR.
Chuck?
Paul, has anyone clarified that with the auditing firm?
I do not know if Cheryl contacted the auditor. We got the numbers from the audit, so I don't know.
So just because
Cheryl's here with me.
Okay.
Stopped in on her way home, and she has not touched base with the auditors about those figures.
Okay.
figures are.
So I apologize for getting it to the meeting late, but just so I understand, what we're talking about is that there's roughly 2% available to move after the audit, correct?
Only if you want to
Correct.
bring, only if you don't want to put anything into CNR and you want to move money from CNR into unassigned fund balance.
I apologize again, just so I understand, just to catch up to speed. There was like 12 point something left at the end of the audit, correct? At the end of the fiscal year.
Right.
In the unassigned fund balance.
In the unassigned fund balance. So what the Board of Finance is pondering is whether to get it down to 10% and what to do with those monies, which is several $100,000, correct?
Yeah, it's actually not. It's 100 and the total math is 262,876, but the problem is some of those monies have already been spent because that's where the difference is. Like originally when you use the audited from the June audit or the audit,
Yep.
You would have $262,876, of which
Okay.
155,000 and change Craig wanted. That was from the Board of Ed.
So that would be where I would want the clarification. And I'm sure Cheryl knows, but I would want that clarification because those monies were budgeted for the school.
$29,000 she's screwing us.
Right, but the Board of Ed came back with $174,876.
Yep.
Because of all the work they did basically with the COVID money, the relief money, and grants. And I'm not opposed to giving back their 1% or 2%, whatever the Board of Finance decides on. The problem is if you give them the whole 2%, then we go negative, but we go below the 10% in the unassigned fund balance. So
what you're saying is that 12% whatever includes what the school. So if the school had used all of their monies at the end of the year, then we would have no monies to move into CNR.
Pretty much. Yep. So I don't know, were you here when I basically my thought was that we're gonna need to use the ARPA funds if we want to continue to have capital projects. There were too many. I mean, there were a lot of weren't a lot. There were a few things that were approved that came through that aided. I mean, the town only returned $88,000. That's what their unassigned fund balance was at the end of the year. The difference in budgeted and used. So.
So basically, what we're talking about is we are now grappling with the reality that this CNR, which has been dwindling for years,
just like you said in meeting one. Yep.
And the ironic part about it is the figure that I have that we're looking to see of CNR to cover right now is $253,936 of what we've been deliberating on for 3 weeks here. And that's probably one of the lowest appropriations that I can remember from CNR in a number of years.
Yep.
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but the motion that the Board of Education is hoping that the Board of Finance makes is to adjust the cap on what can be transferred to their non-lapsing fund and not tying a particular dollar amount into it.
That's correct. It just says,
let me just finish while I got my mindset on this. So if that's the case, the Board of Finance could entertain a motion to change that policy to 2%. And I think there's there's been talk of consideration of changing the term from a capital improvement project to an ed to coincide with the language in the state statute. But if that's the case, the Board of Finance could consider making a motion to cap that at 2% in lieu of the existing 1%, and then qualify that any appropriation to be made will be made in such a way that will not reduce the unassigned fund balance below 10%.
I'm not sure that you can promise that, Bill, only because if the school comes across a situation, I'll just use a special needs requirement, and suddenly they have to approach us with a $100,000 bill. It would have nothing to do with capital projects, and we could potentially be going under that 10% threshold. So I think you would be handcuffing yourself, and not necessarily legally. I'm guessing there.
Anybody else have any comments on that?
Paul, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Hope he's unhappy.
Paul, just point of information, what is the 10% number? We know 262.
10% number is 100, I'm sorry,
Million?
$1,503,687.
So that's the number you're trying to protect in the 10% unassigned fund?
Correct. That's 10% of the 21-22 budgeted expenditures.
But isn't there over 460,000 in the CNR fund now? And if Bill's only requesting 253,000, wouldn't we be far below the threshold?
Well, that was the figure that I had worked out and reported to this committee a couple of weeks ago, that I thought that was what I was told. But apparently out of that 459,000, there have been deductions made during this year from CNR that was authorized in the last budget package.
Okay, so the 459 number comes from the audited balance minus the capital expenditures approved by the voters in May. That's where the 459 comes from. And then the additional deductions are what was also voted on that carries forward, such as the things that are on that are 5 years long, I'm trying to look at what we have here, the fire truck,
The funds that were unexpended.
right, the school bus, a school bus. So those things have to be accounted for because we have a lease payment that's due no matter what. The good news is the lease payment on the fire truck, that's why it doesn't match up, is because it's far less than the 74,000. But I think I may have misspoke. Cheryl, don't hit me. Anyway, that's I'm just telling you the bottom line, so to speak.
The thing that Cheryl is referred me to, capital authorization, it's on page 58, 65 of the audit report.
Right.
Capital authorizations carried forward is senior housing lighting project, senior housing infrastructure, Pompey Hollow Park infrastructure, evaluation, assessor's software, fire truck for $74,250, road resurfacing for 3,544. Playscape, nothing on the playscape. And 5,000 for historical property repairs. Those total 117,466.
Right.
The Pompey Hollow Park infrastructure, the 125,000, that's a steep grant, it's reimbursable. So we're getting the reimbursement package together. So we should get the 125 back.
I don't see 100. I don't see 125 on that list.
That's in this current year, 21, 22.
There was only 5,000 carried forward from that.
We're showing only 5,000 was spent regarding that project.
That's the carry forward, right?
That was the match that we had to supply that came out of Joe's budget.
Okay.
Okay.
So that 125 isn't even in that number because the number's only 117,000.
Right.
So the 5,000 is in there. But
So Paul, are we saying that's what's encumbered, that 117?
that 117 is encumbered. So that would bring it down to
341,
with all that
534.
341, 617.
So we're really working with a CNR of 341 right at the moment.
That is correct.
Until you guys potentially move dollars in. Although, again, I am unclear that, and again, I would rely on Cheryl for this. And in fact, what I would be doing is probably having a meeting with her just to clarify my understanding of what dollars go to the school and how that affects what you guys can move.
Yeah. So Chuck, I just sent you the PDF that the Board of Finance got for the meeting tomorrow. That's where that came from. Cheryl
Okay.
and I created it. Well,
Okay.
so she sent me the figures. I put them in a PDF so nobody can monkey with it. But that's where that came from. We sat down on Friday and because I had the same reaction probably you just had. Well, I wanted to make sure that that the board got the right information.
Chris,
So,
that
I mean-
125,000 that you're talking about is reimbursable. Is that shown anywhere in projected revenue?
It's under suggested funding for this current year. Shown as an expenditure and as a revenue.
You mean on the last sheet you gave us or gave me?
Yep, it's in the first column. Town projects, it's the last thing.
The steep grant?
It's 125,000.
Okay.
So Bill, just to clarify what you're looking at, it's really in last year's budget. And so if you look above under town projects, Pompey Hollow infrastructure is that 125. That's in the very first column. And then under suggested funding is 125. It doesn't show up in the current proposed budget at all because it's a wash. And it's a wash from last year's budget. So it's sort of a non-thing in this particular budget.
The wash you're referring to is in this fiscal year that we're presently in
the column that we're looking at for sure. But if I'm understanding Chris correctly, the 125, we're not going to do the project unless we get a commitment to the 125. Am I correct on that?
The project is already done.
That
already did the project.
That's
project
the
is done,
paving
we
and the
just have to
sidewalk, right?
submit the reimbursement.
Okay, but we're going to be reimbursed for that. So it's looking, it's
125.
appearing as a wash.
Yep.
All right, let me be a little thick on this because Chuck, you said you didn't think what I was suggesting that the Board of Finance consider tomorrow night about changing the policy from 1% to 2%.
Which I agree with.
Not tying a dollar amount into it, but doing a contingency that any appropriation that they decide either tomorrow night or in the future to make does not allow the unassigned fund balance to go under 10%.
I personally think, first off, I'm wondering if it's even legal to do, but I think it handcuffs us as a town. I think it handcuffs you. I think it handcuffs the school, and I think it handcuffs the Board of Finance to not be able to be flexible when needed. That's one of the nice things about this fund. And this has happened in the past where the Board of Ed has come to us with a request actually from unassigned fund. And we as a board said, look, why don't we tap into your 1% instead of the unassigned fund to handle that particular topic? And we've come to those. So it gives the board in the town flexibility to help respond to the school if there's a need. Does that make sense?
Well, sort of, and I don't mean to be thick on this thing, but if the Board of Finance just changes the verbiage of the existing policy from the 1 to the 2%, and then does the small caveat of instead of being a capital improvement project, that they make it in line with the state statute, educational purposes, I think the term I've heard. But don't attach tomorrow night a dollar amount of that. I guess I don't understand where that would potentially be illegal or handcuffed.
Well, I'm confused by your question though. So you want the board to review and possibly change the policy, but not to move any funds from unassigned to the non-lapsing tomorrow. Is that what you're asking?
That I guess that's in general, that's what I'm asking.
Okay, I mean,
Until we get clarification, because
there's no rush to move the money, but it doesn't, I mean, I think at the last meeting too, I pointed out, it really doesn't matter. It's the same pile. We just kind of put a divider in it to decide how much Craig gets in the non-lapsing and how much the town gets in their capital non-recurring.
and my
You know,
thought
and
behind my
moving
idea
it,
was that the dollar amount doesn't have to be done tomorrow night.
right, that's correct. It doesn't. You know, right now, it actually, you'd have to ask Cheryl how it actually all works, but you're right. It doesn't have to be done tomorrow night. The policy can be reviewed.
Yeah.
Let me just
Chuck,
point
I
out.
see your hand, but I saw Craig's first. Craig,
Oh,
did you
my
have?
fault.
Well, I'm a little confused. I think the issues are getting convoluted here. We're confusing capital with the unassigned fund with the non-lapsing fund. I just want to be clear. There is no limit to how big the non-lapsing fund can grow. The statute says you can put up to 2% of the unspent funds in there. The second point is, if we're already at 12.5%, Paul, you said 1,503,687. What does the number actually have to be 10% to maintain our bond rating? And my third point is, even with the audited amounts, and all of those amounts we've been discussing tonight have been audited, including the 174,876 and the 155,378, they have stood up through the fall, through the audit. They are accurate. If we subtract the 117,466 from the 459 capital, that still leaves 341,619, more than enough to pay for Bill's capital projects.
Yeah, but the problem is that you're right, but the problem is you pay for Bill's capital projects, and it depletes that to whatever that number is, because I don't have them in front of me at the moment. But roughly 75,000, maybe a little more, is left in CNR, which in all intents and purposes is pretty much nothing. But you are correct in saying that the statute does not have a limitation, but the town's policy does have a limitation. It currently has a 3% limitation. So that's where that number came from, using the audited funds or audited amounts. And I'm trying to get to the number, what we would need to maintain the 10. Well, it has to stay at the 10% unassigned fund balance has to remain at $1,503,687. That's the 10%.
Does that unassigned fund include CNR or non-lapsing?
No,
Oh,
that's where that 1.5 million is the 10%. CNR is separated out. It's not part of unassigned fund. That's one of the reasons that the Board of Finance moves that money, is to protect it so that it can be used for capital expenses and not subject to, I guess, litigation. Is that a correct statement, Chuck? Yeah.
Correct.
And then I know that a couple years ago, under then Governor Malloy, the state actually came and asked the towns how much they had in their unassigned fund balance, because they were going to adjust budget numbers to towns based on how much money the town had put away. So that's the reason that the towns and as Bill's pointed out, I mean, we're in a unique situation with Ashford where we've done a good job of maintaining that unassigned fund balance, but that's so that we have a pad, and also so that we can go to a bond and hopefully get a good rate on it.
Are you anticipating any
muted.
other pressure on the unassigned fund? Because doing the math here, even after we were to pay for everything and move the maximum 2%, there'd still be $1.5 million in unassigned, and there'd still be over 88,000 left in capital. So I'm confused on where the
I don't
push is.
know. I'm just giving you the math that Cheryl gave me. So
Well, I'm basing it off the audited numbers and what you just gave me tonight, the 117, which would leave 349,619 in the capital. Even after all of these expenses, there'd be 88,810. The unassigned fund is still $1,503,687. And you would have
also include the 295,737 out of capital though?
no, we're going to take, what are you saying is 295? Because we're going to use the ARPA funds for some of that.
No, so currently the audited page 14 audit shows 754,820. There's already, besides the 117,466 encumbered, there's also 295,737 that's budgeted to come out this year. It was approved for the 21-22. So that leaves you 341, basically, for lack of a better term, right now.
I think we're saying the same thing. So even if you subtracted the 252 that Bill put in his memo, 252,809, that still leaves over $88,000 in capital non-recurring. It still leaves $1.5 million in unassigned, and it would still allow you to put the maximum into the non-lapsing.
Not the way this spreadsheet is running it. It shows that we'd have to actually move $5,737. Oh wait, I'm sorry, wrong. That's the wrong number anyway. No, it shows that we'd have to move $1,500. So
1,500, you said?
let me put the number in a different place and see if there's a problem with this spreadsheet.
You do that. I think Chuck wants to pipe in here. Chuck?
Just viewing this from afar, I think we're spinning our wheels in details that need to be dealt with, and I think this is really much more productive with broader brushstrokes. And I think the point is that the school has a position, and I think they need to advocate for their position. But ultimately, this particular decision is going to land on the Board of Finance to figure out. That's what their role is, to figure out where the monies are and where they're going and how they're being allocated. If anybody's asking me, again, I'm just a citizen here with no power, but if anybody's asking me, my thinking on this is that CNR fund needs to be coveted. It needs to be protected as much as possible. Where CNR comes from, and just as a reminder, is essentially if we can keep our budgets intact throughout the year, and we may get some unknown revenues along the way from the state, maybe a couple of extra dollars, maybe some reimbursement for a storm, whatever. But primarily where it comes from is from our tax collector who over collects. And I don't mean over collects, but I mean, we
Over anticipated revenue.
correct. And so that's where those monies come from. And we're spending more than we're bringing in. That's what this is telling us, because we keep taking away from CNR. My feeling is that Paul may not have his language organized right at the moment, but I think he's on the right track in trying to figure out what's in CNR and how to land as lightly as possible on that particular fund. It is a dwindling fund. It's continuing to dwindle. So we really have to work hard to keep something in there. So to Craig's point, yes, there's adequate funds for this year, but there's no magic funds coming next year. So we're working with, let's just say 400,000 this year for easy numbers to work with. Next year, we're going to be working with 100,000. So that's a huge problem for next year. We can't even cover what we are already obligated for, which means we will have to tax for those in the next tax season. So based on the obligations we already have, fire trucks, whatever stuff we've got out 5 years for leases, we may be in a position next year, not this budget year, but next budget year, unless magic funds come from somewhere, where we'll actually have to tax to run this capital budget, which we've never had to do in the past. So that's why the CNR is really important. And that's where the Board of Finance has to step in and basically do their best to try to protect that CNR as best as they can. So it may be reaching out to the school and saying, look, we've got in here 135,000, let's say, for the new oil tank. Is there a way for them to kick in 200,000 if you want it to come through the school? Or you could just say, nope, we're going to fund it ourselves, but it just means you can't give the school as much. Where the pile comes from.
Right. Like I said, it's the same pile. It's just a matter of how we divide it up at this point and who's going to take the hit.
But my point with this is to set things in motion and do them properly and give the school some kudos. So what do I mean by that? If you give the school the monies that they're asking for, yet then they give it back to you to help fund this gas tank, the optics look better. The oil tank, the optics look better. It looks like you're working with the school. The school has faith that you're working with them. And then you guys can also say, look, the school is going to fund this whole thing out of their budget or whatever percentage. They're standing on their heads to make this as possible. So I guess what I'm saying is you can put things in motion properly and everybody wins, if that makes sense. I do disagree, and I'm just going to say this because I feel like I should say it. I am going to disagree with Bill a little bit, and probably Craig, on working with the language from the state for the 1% fund. I strongly believe that the current policy language is safer and it gives flexibility. The Board of Finance can always say, yes, use it for some other thing. You have the right to do that, but I much rather think it's a much easier sell to sell it as funding for things that have already been approved. And I'll shut up from there.
Craig?
Well, I think we're going to be okay. Paul, I'd like to sit with you even as early as tomorrow to look at the spreadsheet. I don't have what you're looking at, but the numbers to me seem like they work.
Are you going to be in your office tomorrow, Craig,
Yeah,
in the morning. I have other meetings in the afternoon tomorrow. So,
me too.
what time do you get in?
It doesn't matter. You tell me.
Can we do 11 a.m.? Well, you know what? Make it 10. My other meeting's at 2:30. I don't want to run long and then have to race. I'll come to your building tomorrow for 10. All right.
You got it. You got
Judy, I know you're probably working, so you can't be there, but you're welcome to come.
The only
I
thing that
appreciate
I
your
would
time as
ask,
well.
and I've got commitments tomorrow too, or I'd like to be there, is that if you do generate something where you guys have a meeting of the minds, generate it to all of us so we're looking at the same document.
Yeah, no problem. No problem. Definitely. And Chuck, I think you missed it when I was explaining what was going on here in the beginning, and you hit the nail on the head. We can't deplete it to nothing. And to me, anything much less than what we have is pretty close to nothing. We have obligations out there for the next 4 to 5 years, depending on what project it was. And I said that my recommendation, personal recommendation, is we look at the ARPA funds and use them judiciously to continue with some of these capital projects that do need to be accomplished. And then work diligently to try to bring the CNR fund back up to where it needs to be. And you know, we need to, the Board of Finance is going to have to do their role and step on people's toes and say, no, we can't do some of these things that that people may want. But I said it before I became a board member. You heard me. There's a big difference between want and need, and we have to define that. And sometimes it's hard.
Yeah, and just again as a historical note, and Bill, I think you probably know this, and probably Christine does too. This whole thing started years ago when we had a big bonding package, and those projects came in under budget, and we ended up with a big lump of cash that was put in. That's how this whole thing was created. And so we've been adding to that fund, but we've been spending slightly more than we've been putting in historically. And that's why this thing keeps, you know, slowly sinking. So again, we've got a pretty good sized bonding package coming up. If for some reason we can get those budgets, you know, those projects to come in slightly under budget, like the last time, then that may be a possible source of refunding the capital budget again. I wanted everybody to understand how this whole thing actually started and where the funding actually kicked off from.
Chris, don't put that part in the minutes.
Yeah, well, you know, in reality, Ashford is pretty lucky to have the fund, because a lot of towns are, you know, they're going to referendum to vote for a new fire truck or vote for a new oil tank, where we haven't had a tax for that. And that's a luxury, so to speak, but it's also a responsibility. And, you know, if we continue to do this, the overspend and not put back, it won't be a luxury anymore. And
Well,
I mean, it all happens to coincide to a really bad time with everything else that's going on too, that makes it even more difficult.
As a municipality, we've all worked very hard together over a number of years to put ourselves in a situation like we're in right now, and that's in a hell of a lot better shape than a number of municipalities. Having a 10% fund with a little buffer on that, plus having a CNR fund. Many municipalities do not have the luxury of doing that. I think what we did was we were presented with an opportunity, took advantage of it, and used it to our advantage that we've been able to utilize over the years. And hopefully we'll work together to maintain that. All right. What I was going to look for, and I totally understand that you folks are in a strictly advisory capacity, but I was going to look for a motion that under the capital improvements line item for items that are going to be mentioned in the budget, you folks were comfortable enough to endorse those. Can I get a reading on that right now? I'm a bit confused because we're all looking at some different numbers right now. Chuck?
Bill, I'll be brief. I would certainly make a motion, but I would also want you, the selectmen, to have our understanding that some of these numbers may change, particularly on the funding side. You guys are going to clarify some things. You may have a project that has to be modified. Again, this is your you guys are presenting this. So I would certainly be willing to make a motion to accept it as it's presented tonight, with the understanding that we know you're going to have to change details to clarify for presentation, and you may do so even after your presentation to the Board of Finance.
Well, and I agree, and they're all, everything we're working on right now are working documents that are subject to change. I want to look in, for instance, to what Chris was talking about the STEEP grant, and to make sure if we have not received those funds, how we're going to deal with those funds when we do receive them. The 125 she was talking about.
Mm-hmm.
It's
What?
budgeted revenue.
Okay. Cheryl said it's budgeted revenue. So I just, in my own mind, I'd like to see a column with everything we have in anticipated budgeted revenue. But anyway, I talked to Joe. We had a meeting this morning because I asked Joe whether or not there were two things that came to mind that we have in the column that are presently not in ARPA, that they're in the town budget. One is the new dump truck, another new dump truck, and the other is the roller. And Joe advises me that what we're hearing from our dealers in that is that truck, if we go next year and try to buy it, that we're looking at right now, is in most probability is going to be 22% higher than it is now in our bottom line cost, and it's probably going to take us 3 years to get online. And our other trucks that we're looking to replace are not going to hold up. The roller, we could probably eliminate it, but we don't have the efficiency of doing it in our own timing. There would be a cost to go out and pay somebody and rent a roller. And again, if we're taking a roller, I think you said, Joe, is the same scenario. Instead of the 40,000 we've got right now, we'd be talking about close to 50,000.
Yeah, next year it'd be $52,000. It's going to have a 22% increase. As of March, middle of March, the increase starts.
So, I mean, given the economy, the delivery impact on taking this equipment in, my thought is, although I'd like to be reducing this budget by some, if we did that and took those out, we'd be saving in a capital expenditure of $84,000. I just don't think it's prudent, but I'm open for comment on that.
Craig, what do you think about putting the fuel to gas tank off a year? It's already in our general budgets to pay for gas.
I have been thinking for the last 20 minutes about what we could put off to maintain the 10% reserve fund. I would say no on the roller, yes on the gas tank. I noticed the gas tank on line 9 was not highlighted, so I assumed this might be a better question for Christine. In the copy I have, it's not highlighted. I assume it was included in the 22-23 capital.
Where it would hurt us to put the gas tank off a year.
Maybe after Paul and I meet tomorrow, we could come up with a hard number and we can make those kind of decisions next Wednesday.
Yeah.
But I believe we have the fuel tank in the ARPA funds.
It's not, well, it's not in my list, Bill.
Yeah,
It's line 9 on the sheet that Christine sent us. It just wasn't highlighted. I think that's an option, Joe, for things, to keep our numbers correct.
Okay.
The bottom, the subtotal is right.
Okay, thank you.
I just didn't highlight it.
And that includes the gas tank?
Yes.
So that's under ARPA funds anyway.
Mhm.
Okay. It's just not-
Which is under ARPA.
it's
so
not-
I had a question two questions, I guess, for Joe. The first one was the additional dump truck. I assume that's a big 6-wheeler?
Yeah, it's a regular sized dump truck.
Right, okay. And I know they need to be replaced, so I'm not questioning that.
Lead time
but-
out, I called the International today just to get a lead time on them. And he
Yep.
assures me that if I ordered it as soon as tomorrow, I wouldn't have it for at least a year and a half.
Well, I know from what I went through with the fire truck that I think it took us 5 months just to get the cabin chassis to the factory to put the body on. So, but no, my actual question was, my second part of the question was, what's the intention with the old truck? And then also we have the fire truck that'll probably be decommissioned within the next week or so. So is there a possibility of some return of revenue with the sale of those vehicles, I guess is my question.
This is true. The fire truck is up for whoever wants to sell it. I replaced that with that F-550.
Right. So the town, that's more for Bill, but I guess my question for you is what's the plan with whatever truck you're gonna get rid of?
Yes, when we get a new dump
Okay.
truck, we will be selling the 2008 International.
Okay.
And
I'm not buying it, by the way, either.
As far as selling our current A10, we're only gonna get a couple $1,000s for it. You know, we might as well run it until it doesn't run.
Okay. All right.
It'll,
I was gonna say a couple $1,000s is better than nothing at this point, so.
whatever you guys wanna do.
Bill, are you ready for a motion?
I am.
How about if I make a motion to accept the proposal as Chris has presented it in this this chart, with the understanding that funding and projects may be fine-tuned as more information is garnered.
I'm comfortable with that motion. Is there a second? Jim seconds. Any more discussion? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Oh, wait a second, aye. Okay, unanimous, Chris. All right, folks. Have you taken a updated look at the ARPA proposed list that on, and I know it's not your venue or scope of your work, but I do appreciate your input on it. Again, another list that's a work in progress. But what I'm hoping to do, I'm hoping by the middle of next month that we're up and running with our hybrid meetings. That'll both be Zoom and in person for those that want. What I'd like to do is to call a public hearing and then take to a vote to the entire town of the things that we're going to put under it and apply to ARPA funding. I just think that for transparency's sake, for input from the public, that makes the most sense. There are some things that have come up. Some of you I know have been in on it, but we were asked to attend a Eversource webinar earlier in the week, or last week rather. And we're being told that there's a likelihood of rolling blackouts coming to the state of Connecticut. And it's not that we're going to hold a whole lot of ability to control that, because there's a group called the ISO New England that runs the grid that we're a part of, that encompasses all of New England. And if an emergency comes up, and normally we look at these things during the summer when there's a high demand for electrical because of air conditioning. Well, that's not the case that's driving this right now. What's driving it is the probability, and particularly if the Ukraine blows up, but the probability of a lack of fuel source. And that's going to drive these rolling blackouts. And what we're told, if we get to worst case scenario, we're among 5 areas in the state that will be hit. They'll run from 4 to 10 hours at a time, which during the summer is an inconvenience. During the winter is a severe health potential problem. It's not like we haven't had it before, but why I'm making this little speech is what I've asked and working with Joe and I know some of our other folks here, looking at our generator system in all of our town buildings and what the capabilities are, what upgrades we have to do. We've got a project right now here at the town office building to upgrade our generator and our electrical system in this building. But we're looking at that. Those could be costs that we're going to be looking at in the very near future to try to prepare ourselves. We're also going ahead, and nothing to do with dollars, but we're going ahead and we've been working with our social service people, identifying shut-ins, people that are on oxygen, that are dependent, because while in a typical blackout during the summer, there are certain facilities that remain generated through the electrical grid. What they're talking about is everything going off. Everything that doesn't have its independent generation is going off. So we're looking at some potential costs and some impact on our ARPA funds. I'm hoping that we can utilize on that, but those are costs that we're looking at. I don't mean to alarm anybody, but after getting through with that webinar, I was a bit alarmed because dealing with one of it and one instance of it is one thing, but if it's multiple occasions over a short period of time, it could be real problematic for our entire community. So,
Bill, thank you for the update. As a little footnote, we have a nice shot of Joe, and we cannot see you at all while you're speaking. So it's just a little footnote for future meetings so that we can see you. There you are.
I'm off in the corner here in the dark.
Yeah. So actually, in the future, it's nice to be able to see you when you're talking. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sometimes my wife tells me it's better to hear me and not see me.
In the near future, I'll be able to do this from home too.
Yeah, thanks for the update.
Well, thank you for your motion. Does anybody have any other comments about ARPA or any questions in general?
Friday, I'll send out a new spreadsheet because we have a couple of things to add. And then I have a
Okay.
correction because I have the dump truck twice.
So Bill, the purpose of this committee has basically come to a conclusion, and you guys are moving forward at this point on your own, correct?
That's correct. I'm having a special selectmen's meeting, although I don't believe I've heard from Catherine yet, but I'm going to assume she can make it on Saturday in preparation of going through what we've been working on and also our budget package in general, in preparation of assuming I'm going to make a presentation to the Board of Finance on the 17th.
Great.
Tomorrow night, I've got 2 meetings I'm going to try to attend, both the Board of Ed and the Board of Finance. So that'll be an adventure too. Anyway,
All right.
never a dull moment. And thank you, Chuck, for wanting to see me. I appreciate that.
All right,
Anybody
guys,
have
I'm gonna
anything
jump off
else?
the meeting. Thank you very much for all your work.
Well, thank you, folks.
All right. Bye-bye.
Have a good night. I'll adjourn the meeting.
Thanks, Paul. See you tomorrow.
I'll see you tomorrow, Craig. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll get to the bottom of it.
Steve.